much. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Akshay Chavan, and I'm currently working in iauro since the last June, and I'm currently with the NAT team. Let me share my screen first. Uh, just a second. Okay. So I hope this topic is relatively new for you guys to go through it. And let's start with the presentation. Now, as you can see, this is a word cloud, right? Do any of you have familiarity with the words mentioned over here? Yeah, I would like to hear from you. Or you can type it in the chat box. I think that most of these terms are relatively new for you. So let's get started with this. Now, the agenda for today's presentation is okay. I see some messages. Okay, fine. So the agenda is the introduction, what this is all about, the application, where it has been used, some basic concepts which will help you to get started with this, what tools currently we are using or it has been used in the industry, the workflow about how the things will go and how you will be able to create, and from there what to do with the created models. So as you can see on the screen, here you can see, okay, yeah, that's fine. You have some rough ideas about it, Raj. So as you can see in this image, there is some sort of shapes made up with some vertices, edges, in simple terms, triangles, right? So the reality, modeling reality in 3 dimensions is all about this. So we have an idea, we start with the concept, and in the 3D workspace, we design that model so that it looks like more real life. So as you can see through the 4 stages, how adding more detail or more geometry to the objects gives it a more realistic look, right? So let's get to the introduction. In the introduction, it's just about, as Kirti ma'am already mentioned, uh, visualizing the reality in a simulated workspace that is there. Uh, there is some mathematical terms behind this, and I think we are not going much in that. I think for most of you, mathematics must be boring, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yes.
So let's not go much into the mathematics and stick with the idea of generating models. So this is just an introduction. Uh, okay, next, the applications. First and foremost, the first two must be, the most things, the first stuff that comes to your mind when you hear 3D models, right? So for entertainment, various shows have been using 3D models to model their characters, to create CGIs and effects. For game in specific, I would like to elaborate on these three, terms. World creation. In world creation, what happens is in the games which are like open world games, they have their own sandbox RPGs. where everything. Okay, where the creation of the world is essential part of the game. Like if you take examples of some open world games like Skyrim, or there are some other games where world creation has so much focus on. The world creation includes, creating various biomes for the, for the game, for the player to experience. Some parts may be mountainous, there may be some deserts, some marshes over there. So all that is modeled using So the biomes, to stimulate the different kinds of biomes, it becomes very important. Next is the character generation. Two main parts of character generation is one is creating the character, and second is animating that character. So the animation here becomes the very important part based on how the character is modeled. If character has a lot of complex geometry, the animation becomes a lot of more subtle. It looks more of a natural, like the character which we have created in game looks very real life like. So the next part is asset creations. The assets for game could be anything which you can interact, or which are there just for to add the ambience in the game. Like for example, the trees and the plants would be non-interactable assets. Although in some games we have the option of using the plants to create alchemy potions and stuff like that. So the most important aspect of 3D modelings is to implement it in the games. Next, we talk about fashion, right? The Now here the first point is complex design feasibility. This comes under when we are creating special suits or dresses, like for example it may be an astronaut suit, or a suit for firefighters, or for bulletproof vest. So that is being created using 3D modelings, and we can simulate the physics of real life physics, and we can see how it affects the suit that we are going to design. And the next part Okay. The next part is dynamics clothes for VR. A similar, what we can say, a kind of similar term is used by, I guess, Lenskart, where you have to scan your face and you can select what goggle suits your face, right? So now moving on to the next point, that is the medicines. For prosthetics, yes, 3D modeling is used to design body parts like the fingers, the limbs, and the later part, the parts to repair the damaged organs. I think few universities have been successful, to create parts, but still work is going on that area. So that to know that if we can create, damaged organs by 3D modeling. From the architecture point of view, what we can see is the visualizations. We can create, house plans, plans for interior designs, the model layout of the house. For that, 3D modeling can be used, and the surface modeling is just, adding hard surfaces to the created models so that we can see how the model will look actually once it is finished. Like for example, if you are buying a kitchen counter, so with the help of surface modeling, you can see how that counter will look different if it is a marble counter, or how it is different if it is a wooden counter, right? So moving on to the next slide, that is the basics and what operations that are being used. We'll cover this slide actually, in the tool itself, in the Blender itself, so that you can get a better idea. So now the tool, talking about the tool. So the tool that I'm going to, introduce you today is called Blender. Blender is used for 3D modeling. As you can see, the features mentioned, it is used for all the above purposes. Let me give you a quick introduction to each of the points mentioned here. First, the 3D modeling is today we are going to see some part of it. We are trying to model something today. For UV unwrapping, the method is when a model is generated, right? We need to apply some texture to it. so that it can look, it has some texture, some material, some color to it, some how the how the object will interact when light hits it. So for that purpose, what we do is we cut the object and try to unwrap it on a 2D surface. So I guess if time permits, we will be seeing today how to unwrap a model. The texturing is the next part. Once the model is UV unwrapped, we can add textures to it. So whatever the model may be, suppose we are designing tree, so we need some wooden texture for barks, or if we are designing some floors, so we need some wooden floor texture or some marble floor texture, like that. The next part, what Blender is used for, is animating with the help of keyframes, right? In animation, there's a concept of keyframes, and for particular keyframes, what action or in what present. Rigging is adding bones to the character that you have created. These bones are like pointers, which help your characters to move freely around, and they show like if you are moving that bone, you can see your character is moving his arm or shaking his legs or something like that. Simulation is creating simulating environments with respect to the fluid, smoke and particle. I have a demo for this, so which we can see. For sculpting is like a real life sculpting, where you start with the model and you carve out the piece from the model and add some, it's just like how the sculptor renders the model, like how we create a statue of someone, like it's same as that. Rendering is the final part. I mean, rendering is whatever you have done up till now, like creating a model, adding texture to it, adding materials to it. Rendering is just the final output that we see, that how it will look under certain condition, under lightning, under how it will be the final output. And as well as Blender is used for video editing, for VFX, for making short movies, animation, 2D animation as well. So now we talk about the workflow. The workflow is pretty much simple. The first and foremost thing we require is templates. Templates are essential to create a model, because we need to have some idea in our mind that what are we modeling. Once we get used to model the things so much, we can sometimes skip the template and start with the actual process. Then the next important step is identifying the shape that constitute towards that object. This part, I think it will be more properly explained while we are doing it, actually. The third part comes the meshing, that is, adjusting and creating, designing the actual object. And for the fourth step, we are just generating the UVs and applying the textures. And a final part, for some objects, it is optional. You can skip the materials if it is a flat object. And for some objects, it may be required to add some materials to it. So I think from here onwards, we should jump into the actual demo. So this is the screen that you will be greeted when you start the Blender. So this is called the 3D viewport. This is your mesh, your what you can say fundamental building block. There are other shapes available as well. I'll just start the screencast so you can see what keys I'm using. So this is the camera. If the numpad 0 gives the access to the camera, and we can see how the object will be rendered when it is seen via a camera in a game or in some other perspectives. The other thing is, this is the light source that illuminates this area. Just excuse me for a moment. Okay, and yeah, talking about the fundamental concepts. Now, currently, this mode is called the object mode, wherein we can add, uh, the basic fundamental blocks to it. Let me show what all options we have here. This is just a 2D circle available. These are some of the different, building blocks that are available for us to start our modeling with. So, what the second point was there in the workflow, that is to, identify the basic shape of the object that we are going to use, we are going to model, is that we have to select, one of these base shape from which we are going to start the actual modeling process from what is doing. And this, okay, some other fundamental concept. Now we have switched to edit mode. Now, as you can see, the current object selected is the cone, right? So these lines on the cone are the edges that are present. Uh, the whole, the tip of, let me show you here. These small dots are called the vertices, and the gray area that you can see here, part of a triangle, this is called a face. So correspondingly, there are three, selection menus available. First one is the vertex select, second one is the edge, and third one is the faces. Now here you can see a face of the cone has been selected, right? Now let's talk about some fundamental operations. We'll remove rest of the objects from our view and only work with the cube for now. This mode is called the wireframe mode, wherein you can actually edit the edges that are in a complex model. You want to get a closed look of the edges that are inside. So you can use the wireframe mode, to go inside an object and see if there is some edges are there, if something is overlapping with someone, and desiring up to you. Okay, from this is called the tree. It indicates what all components are there in your current scene. So from here also we can use to delete, and we can edit the objects from here as well. The circular, the crosshair that you're seeing over here, this is called the 3D cursor, and from here you can add the objects. Now it is located at this position, so we can add a mesh over here, that is the cube. Okay, now currently we are in object mode. For to edit any of the mesh, you have to switch back to the edit mode. So now currently, as you can see, the whole cube has been selected. The selection is highlighted by, the orange color that is there. Now some fundamental operations. If we select this and press S, here we come to the fact of scaling the objects. Scaling means increasing its size, or we can decrease the size of this object. Now this scaling can also be done with respective the axis. The green line that you're seeing here is the y-axis. The red line that you're seeing here is the x-axis, and the blue crosshair that you're seeing over here is the z-axis. Now currently this has been set because we are considering z-axis as the floor, so you can't see a blue line growing straight up right from here. So this was the first operation that we can commonly use, that is the scaling. It can be done with respect to axis. So if I use scale and lock, now the target is the mesh is locked on x-axis, so it will only expand in that direction. Similar, you can do with all kind of axes that are present there. The next operation that we are going to see is the rotation, that we are going to rotate it about the 3D cursor. We can rotate it up to any angle that you want, and the axis constraint can be applied on the rotation as well. The next operation, that is the transformation, that is achieved in Blender by using the G key. So now you can see the object is here. I can place that object somewhere far away from it. Again, I can place it somewhere here. So these are some basic operations that have been used. One more operation that is mentioned in the slide is sharing or skewing operation. For that, let's switch to the edit mode. Skewing operation, we can say, is a special case of transformation or scaling operation. Now with the right click, we can select the edge, and if we just move it, only the selected edge is moving. That means the object has been skewed from the perspective of this edge. The all other vertices and edges are fixed to the initial coordinates. Only the edge that we have selected is moving. Right. I think this has given you some idea, some introduction, about this, how the movement works in the Blender tool, or how you can manipulate the objects. So let's get started with some demo. And yeah, one more thing, the number keys will help you to go in certain perspectives, right? So when you press 1, let me add a mesh so that you can get a clear understanding of this. Okay, so this is the official mascot of Blender. It has its own name, Susan. So now when you press 1, you can see we are in a front view. We are seeing its face. The numpad 3 key gives you the side view of that object. 2 can be used to toggle, free movements. Like by a certain amount, we are moving it freely over the space. 7 can be used to give the top orthographic view. We are viewing the object from the top. 9 can be used to view the object from the bottom. And similarly, there's one more view over here, and that is the orthographic view. In orthographic view, what happens is the third axis is flattened out, and so you can see your 3D object on a flat 2D surface. Now you can see the difference in the views when I switch back and forth in orthographic and perspective modes. So this, in the perspective mode, we can see there is some depth to it, to the object. Now when I'm switching the mode, the depth of that object is gone, and when I get the front orthographic view, we just only have two axes over here, Z and the X axis. Similar applies to the side orthographic view. So why this view is important is when you're trying to model the item for the first time, it is essential to stay in the orthographic view so that you can progress well along it. So here I can give you one example straight away right over here, that is okay. So let's start by switching into the orthographic view, and let's add a template to it. Now today what we are working with is this bottle. So we are going to model this bottle that is there along with all the materials, the shape, the size, and we are constructing it from the nothing to a real life, stimulated object in the real life. So now, as you can see, we have a template. The closest resemblance for a bottle like this is we can add a cylinder and start working with it. So when you add a mesh, you get some options over here which you can edit, like the number of vertices. The number of vertices show, how smooth your object is. Now, if I reduce the number of vertices, you can see the objects become, what you can say, more edgy and more pointed. Now, in the same way, if I increase the number of vertices, the mesh becomes more and more smooth. So we are going with this configuration initial. Now, by using tab, we are moving to the edit mode. And now we have to think like how are we going to start modeling this. So the first operation which you can see is very common is called the extrude operation. You can use now one more concept is remaining is the edge loop. Edge loop is this the whole loop that is connecting these edges together. You can see all the edges that are vertical, and the whole this loop that is connecting these edges is called the edge loop. So we can select it by pressing Alt tab, or you can use the face selection method. Now what we are going to do, we are going to extrude it. By extruding means we are going to extend from it. So I think this should cover it. And for the next part, what we are going to do is apply the same operation on the top face as well. So now we have a rough shape of whatever the object we are trying to model, So now let's add the finer details to it. Now by using Control R, we can add another edge loop, which let me zoom in. Now when I click on Control R, you can see there's a pink line which goes across the whole cylinder. So that is called the edge loop, and that we can add, okay, let's see, somewhere around here. And what we can do is we can scale it. So it gives a kind of rough shape to our object. So we are moving close to the actual shape that is intended. Now the other operation that we are going to perform is again select the same thing, and now we are going to bevel it. Beveling is the process wherein you smooth out the edges, the sharp corners that are there. Now as you can see, it is just a sharp corner around the edge loop that we have selected. Now when we bevel it, some additional faces are generated so that the shape looks more, you know, uh, like the one that we have in the picture around us. Now just to see through, we can use the Z key and we can go back into the wireframe mode, and we can see where exactly we are missing, we need to add more details to. Now as you can see, this edge should be a little more, invert. It is just extruding outside. So we just scale it a little bit, and we can, go as accurate to the image as possible. Now let's come back and do the same process on the top over here. We'll just add an edge loop. We'll just scale it so that it fits the image, and we'll just bevel it again so that we have a more rounded shape. So this looks good up till here, and as you can see, there is a little more detailed. We need to add few more edge loops over here so that we can achieve the detail that is present in the image. So we can add another edge loop over here, around this point and scale it a little bit inwards. Okay, so there you go. There, I think the most of our shape is completed, and we can see how it looks in the 3D view. So this is how we start with some template, get some ideas, and start modeling around it. Okay, we'll continue with the top part, that is the cap of the jar. For that, we are going into the face selection mode, and we are selecting the top face. Now again, we are extruding it up till here. This should be fine. And now we see, the scaling is not as perfect as the cap. So what we can do here is we can again switch back to the wireframe mode, and using B key we can select the whole area, and we can scale and restrict that object scaling with respect to x-axis. So I think this should be perfect for the cap part. And most of our object is pretty much done by now. And for just one tiny detail I would like to add over here is we'll switch back again to the edge mode and just add a little bit of bevel to the cap so that it is not that much flat as it looks. So it gives a right and round finished shape over here. So coming out of the orthographic view, we can see our basic object is ready, right? So now what to do with what is the next step that we are going to follow? So first of all, the object is very, what we can say is scaled up too much. So we can reduce scale by a little bit so that it looks more like a real jar than a big huge container. Okay, so in this way we can design an object really quickly, and I think we have some time, so I can show you how it is UE unwrapped. So for you, we can just split our screen into two and select the UV image editor. Now, for the unwrapping, purposes, what we can do is we need to add some definitive lines which will tell Blender from where to cut the model. So let me select this edge loop. Now, as you can see, this has been selected. This selected the whole edge right from here to here. And to add a cut to it, we just add a seam. A seam is, a thing where your object will be cut into two, and it will be, unwrapped on a plain piece of paper. So we can add a few more seams so that our object is uniformly unwrapped. I think the seams around here should be good. And now when we press on U, first we have to select the object, and when we press on unwrap option, now here we can see how our object is being unwrapped. From this is basically a UV map. Here we can apply textures, to this the grid that is generated over here, and whatever the color or texture we apply over here get maps to the object that has been created over here. So the process from next year is we usually export the UV map and color it in, add texture. There are multiple ways to add textures to it. We can directly just add an image as a whole texture. We can export this UV map in some image editing tool of our choice, like Photoshop or GIMP, and we can color these parts, and we can see how the texture has been added. We can also texture paint the whole object in the Blender itself. So I think due to the time limitation, we are not actually moving forward with this process. Uh, but for that, I think I can show you some other work that I have done already so that you have an idea of how it works. Now, if you see, this was a UV map that was there, and it's just roughly colored. I've not, considered that the color should not go out of the edges or anything like that. It's just an roughly colored UV map. So you can see the final renderation of that product over here. So this is how the tomato, it's just a bottle of tomato sauce. So this, when we apply the whole texture, it looks something like this. We'll just quickly cover what is this in few seconds. But for now, concentrate on this part over here. Let me open the UV editor as well. Okay, now here you can see how the object is UV unwrapped in this image. And here you have the colored UV map. So this colored UV map gets mapped to the object that we have created. So as you can see in the image over here, let me just make it zoom in a little bit. So based on where the coloring is, this is how you can add texture to the models that you have created. But as you can see, there's one thing missing. This is a glass bottle and there is no shine to the object that we have created. There the part comes wherein we need to add some materials to the object that has been created. For now, we'll just hide this UV screen over here, and just let me show you the how materials are added. Materials can be added, by using the nodes in Blender. Nodes, it's just a collection. You can say just like a linked list where you have to link some certain data to certain parts over here. And as you can see, I have used an image texture. It is the same texture that I have showed you earlier over here. This one. I've used that. And for glass surfaces, there is a shader in Blender that is called the glossy shader. So I've used that shader to emulate that effect, and the whole the output is connected to the surface so that when it is rendered finally, you can see it. So let's go, and this is the last step of rendering. Now, as you can see, there is some shine to the object, and the wood is getting reflected in the glass bottle at a little part of it. Even the shadows are getting reflected. So this is a workflow that we particularly use to model an object. So from template to creating the mesh to adding texture to it, and finally adding some materials accordingly. So this is the way the workflow completely, and this is also how your model will look if you decide to import your model in some games. So this was a short demo on how we do it. Now let's go back and see the remaining part of the slide. So from your from what you can do with the created models, there are many sites available, where you can sell them your created models. You can use them in the games that you play. You can add custom models to it. There are communities which create custom models and they share it with among other players who play the same game, and they can download it and use it in their game. This can be done as an open source, as part open source, or you can commercialize your idea, your models. Or if you like to contribute towards some projects where the models have been used, you can contribute, your project, your models over there. Or you can create some architectural renderings, like creating a room or a house plan. So you can sell those house plans or interior design plans, and you can use them, utilize your models over there. So some alternative tools for Blender are the following ones: 3ds Max, Maya. One point here worth mentioning is most of these are freemium. Like they're either free for a certain number of days or free for personal use. They are not you know for commercial use. If you want to use them commercially, you either have to buy the license, or yeah, I think most of them require license. Now here are some links if you want to visit its site and see what kind of models are there, what how to get. This site is useful if you need some texture to texture your models. And I think that's it from my side.